everyone, it's Lynnea for LDRS Creative, and I'm going to be watercoloring an impressed background today. I'm going to be using the new Tulips Mix Background Impression Press and Foil Plate, and I'll be impressing that into my card, and then just finishing it off with a quick bit of stamping and die cutting using some new spring products from LDRS Creative. Now, before I start my card, I do want to remind you that this Tulips Mix background is an impression letterpress die. So you are going to need to use this with a specialized letterpress platform. I will be using the Better Press by Spellbinders. You don't want to use this with your standard cutting plates and a die cutting machine. You will damage your plates because these dies are thicker than your standard wafer thin dies. So I have this specialized platform, and I will be using that with my regular die cutting machine, but the key here really is the special platform. I have an LDRS Creative A2 cotton panel. These cotton panels are perfect for using these impression press and foil plates with, because the fibers are spread far apart, which allow for a deep impression. Plus, I'm going to be watercoloring, so I'm going to be able to do that with no bleeding, and the water is going to work perfectly with this cardstock. So I'm taping my cotton panel to the top plate of my Better Press platform. I have some rolled tape on the back and then some right on the corners, barely touching those corners so that you're not even really going to see the tape. And then I inked up that Tulips Mix background with some Raven Hybrid ink, which is the LDRS Creative black ink, and you can see how dark and crisp this background is. It is so difficult to see the impression on camera, but trust me, anywhere where you see that black ink is actually pressed down into the cardstock, and it has absolutely amazing texture. I grabbed my rainbow watercolor palette, and now I'm just going to do some easy peasy watercoloring. I'm doing a wet on dry coloring, so my cardstock is completely dry, and I'm just grabbing some watercolor and adding it over top of the tulips. I'm not doing any blending really. Because I'm going onto a dry piece of cardstock here, the paint is going to dry faster in some areas where I may have gotten less paint, and it'll dry slower where I've gotten more paint. So I will actually have some different depths of color without really having to put in any effort. Plus, all these lines that are already in the line art of the tulip background are going to add shading and dimension just from the original artistry of this press plate. I've chosen just a really simple color palette. I have a teal color that I used, a bright kind of in between a hot pink and like a magenta pink, and then I have this navy blue flower, and again just adding just a flat wash of color really, but because the image is pressed in, it's going to help move that water around and give me different areas of saturation. And I'm going to finish this up by grabbing my last color for my flower, which is going to be like an orangey color, and then I will add my green for the leaves and stems, and I'll set this panel aside to dry. It really doesn't take long because I'm not using a lot of water, so I set it aside for about 5 minutes or until the back of the panel felt completely dry. When you're watercoloring, a lot of times the back of your watercolor panel will feel cool, and when it feels warm again, you know that that water is all absorbed and dry. Now I'm going to just start building the rest of my card. Here's the floating squares die, and I'm going to pair that with the Simply Sentiment stamps and the Simply Word dies. I have stacked 3 of these floating square dies together, so I cut that 3 times, stacked them together, and glued them together. I did the same thing with the Love word die from the Simply Word dies, and then I stamped a sentiment and just trimmed that out into a little sentiment strip. I'm playing with my arrangement, and now that I have it down, I'm going to glue down that floating squares die. I have that hanging off the edge, so I'll turn my cardstock over, grab my scissors, and just trim off the excess that's hanging off the edge. I love that this floating squares die and the floating circles die that's also available. They're sized large, so you can have them overhang your card, or you can use them as a focal point. I went ahead and added my word die and my sentiment panel onto a piece of vellum that I cut with that floating squares die, so it's going to fit perfectly in the center. I hid some adhesive behind those elements, and then I also ran some along the edges and cleaned some of that up with my finger so that you wouldn't really be able to see the adhesive. And that is an easy peasy trick for hiding your adhesive behind vellum. Here is my finished card. This came together so quickly, and this background is so bright and happy and perfect for spring. Thanks so much for joining me. I will leave links in the video description below so you can shop these products. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon. Bye.